What's up, humans? Welcome to episode 38 of the Human Music Podcast, Remix Your Life. Now, it is time to remix your life at Producer Dojo. Producer Dojo is hosting this Remix Your Life contest through the website stick.com, where ninjas will set up New Year's resolutions and the dojo will track us on a leaderboard in their Discord chat. The winner gets a free year of membership to the class of 808, over a $1,000 value that includes ILGATE's weekly download archive, monthly private lessons from the Sensies, unlimited track feedback, and much more. We stream this episode live on Dojo TV, our free producer education channel. To sign up for Dojo TV, the weekly download, the Producer Dojo membership, or track feedback, visit the Producer Dojo link in the description. All right? Now, this contest is starting today, Tuesday the 12th, the day that we're going live with this podcast. So there's still time for you to jump in, make some resolutions, and have fun remixing your life with the whole crew in the Discord chat. Again, sign up for the free Dojo TV link and you get the Discord chat link as well. Now, on to the episode. We had a lot of fun, a lot of good user questions from that Discord chat. So make sure you're in there the next time we do this in about a week. All right? Peace, y'all.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesko with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. If we're live, we're live! What's up, everybody? It's the Human Music Podcast coming at you live as hell for the first time. So all those mistakes we normally make and then have to watch ourselves do and put it on the internet anyways, we get to do with you live right now, this time. And you get to know about it before anybody. What's up, Dojo TV? It's the Human Music Podcast.
Hey, what's good?
Here with my beautiful co-hosts, Rip, Kenny, and Tesko. Of course, I'm Trap Jesus. You might know me as Luke Rain, but either way, I am excited to be here with y'all. And right now, because it's official Dojo Remix Your Life Week, we're going to talk about remixing lives. We're going to be taking your questions, so please do not be shy in that chat. Ooh, I think I heard somebody just chat. What's up, y'all? Hey, shouts out to Zach. Shouts out to Hexus, Katie, Boomsayer. What's up, everybody? We got people over here. Oh, air horn. Point. Hell yeah. Please don't be shy in that chat, because any questions you got about what we're talking about or just shit we are neglecting to talk about that you want us to talk about, that's exactly what we need, because otherwise we're just going to have to talk for an hour. And if you've ever listened to our podcast, that's not really a problem, but, help us out. Come on. We're nervous.
Yeah.
We're scared. We're live.
No, I gotta say, dude, you really have like the perfect radio voice. Like
What's
that
up?
whole thing was like you practiced that like 20 times. That was great.
Nope. I just drank a cup of coffee and started spewing words at the internet.
Speaking of spewing words at the internet, since you're doing such a good job, would you like to start us off with how you remixed your life?
Yes, I would. The year was 2017, December. It was a dark and probably because I live in Seattle rainy night. And I was in my studio making really bad bass music.
Dun dun dun!
I
air
decided
horn.
to stop and go to sleep. But I couldn't because I'd been staring at a computer monitor all night. And also, I was just really troubled about how bad music I had attempted to make that night. So I did what any good millennial would do. I started scrolling Facebook in bed on my phone, getting more blue light into my brainicle, and not sleeping. Fatefully, the third post down, I don't know how I remember it was the third one, but the third post down was this weird green-haired dude who spoke directly into the dark depths of my soul and said something like, "Are you a music producer? Are you having trouble finishing tracks? Do you need a breakthrough? Then I have a workshop for you." And I thought, I feel attacked. He knows me.
Don't at me.
Yeah, so I ended up signing up for the breakthrough workshop with Ill Gates. You guys probably figured out who the green haired guy was. And boy, howdy, was that a momentous moment for me. That sounds pretty redundant now that I say momentous moment out loud and repeat it back at myself. But it was a big moment because not only did I get like 8 pages worth of extremely valuable notes off of that first free webinar. At the end, he gave the pitch about the class of 808. It was before there was a Producer Dojo membership, kind of that intermediate step. And so, it took me about a day to, decide to spend my money. But I knew in my heart when I left that that window open with the buy link on it until the next day that I would be spending that money. And I am so glad I did. It is by far the single best purchase I've ever made for my music career. And it began a sequence of events that has helped me remix my life, not just once that time, but quite a few times. I went from releasing 0 songs in 2017 because I knew they all sucked, to releasing 10 with the Dojo on the Cypher mixtapes in 2018. Just being able, first to have a prompt of what to shoot for with my song. Really helped, actually narrowing it down from me trying to do everything all at once to me trying to do one thing at a time was huge. Then actually being able to get feedback on each draft, not having to sit there in my own studio with my own untrained ears and my own piles of self-doubt, just worrying about whether or not this track was good. I just got to make a first draft, turn it in, and then hear what was good to keep and what wasn't good to fix and how to fix it, and get a link to the weekly download the episode that would help me learn how to fix the thing I needed to fix. And it just gave me such an easy step-by-step, this is how it happens. And, after, my first one, I went through draft after draft, and at the time, actually, Ill Gates was doing all that Cypher feedback. That was pretty cool to get direct feedback from Ill Gates at that level. And hearing him actually dig my track, tell me how many problems there still were with it, but be like, oh, there's something here, gave me such a boost, just emotionally and morally, that idea that this is something that could be something, and some of my instincts are good, was a huge help for me. And by the end of that year, I ended up becoming the dojo's resident Reason Sensei. Shouts out to my Reason gang out there. I know you're few and far between in the dojo, but I love y'all. And yeah, that was my initial remixing of my life. I learned to separate my time, not do all my editing, sound selection, and everything all at once while I was attempting to write my songs, separating my time, doing a lot more preparation, learning to work on more of a draft basis than stay in the DAW as long as possible for as many consecutive days as possible and ruin my sense of self-worth progressively. I stopped doing that. That was really helpful. Yeah, it was a huge, huge benefit to me to sign up for the dojo. And, every year since then just keeps getting better. What about you guys? Let's you look like you want to talk, Rip Kenny.
I got to unpack some stuff that you just talked about, because there's a lot of good points in there. Woo! I think that, first of all, having that structure and the framework to create music within is so beneficial on so many different levels. The first being, when you sit down to an empty DAW, the infinity of choice and the infinity of plugins and samples and what music do I make, what music do I like, what music am I good at making, what music do people want to hear, it is so hard to get from that infinity to actually creating something that's finished. And actually having a framework both helps finish the song at all, and also helps you be creative within that framework. It's kind of like reverse psychology, but when you create a box or a structure or any sort of system, then you learn how to push the envelope of that system and think of new and interesting ways to use that system, because you have a starting point and you have a roadmap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
it's kind of like writing a haiku, you know? Put that little structure of what bounds you need to stay in, and then fulfill all your creative needs inside of that.
Yes, shout out haikus. Great form of writing, poetry, art, all in general. Yes.
I don't
hey,
think
quick
I
shout outs
didn't
to
count, but I'm
everybody.
pretty sure that wasn't a haiku.
Yo, quick shout outs to everybody that's joining us tonight. Thanks for spending some time with us here. Luke, I want to ask you, what was the first thing that you kind of picked up from the dojo where you're like, okay, this is exactly what I needed to hear, and this alone was worth joining?
Ooh, man. Let's see. I mean, one of the early things that I really remember latching onto was kind of the concept of figure and ground that Dylan has, brought up in many different places in many different ways. But the idea that there's only two things the listener can ever possibly hear: the singer and the band, the lead and the backup. Like, the one thing that I'm paying attention to at the moment, and all of the parts I'm subconsciously dancing along to without thinking about them. That really changed things for me because I was doing too much. I had doing too much itis. I was like, oh, my music's gonna be so cool because it's complicated and people will hear how many things I piled on top and made this insane wall of sound madness. But what it turned out to be was that I was confusing folks and they didn't know what to pay attention to. And it was, I think the most common feedback I got from Dylan in like the first 6 months was the term layer cake. This is a layer cake and you need to learn how to checkerboard. Like that, and then like the that weekly download about sitting on top and, utilizing the presence or absence of the high-end frequencies in a sound to either have it sit on top of the mix, so like that vocal or that lead synth needs to have a lot of presence in the high end, and anything that you want to push to the back, you want to filter that out to have that feeling. And he does that thing in that I talk about this all the time. He does this in that weekly download where he gets really close up on the mic and he's like, now you can hear all the bass and all of the treble in my voice. And then the further I get away, it's more mid-range and more reverb. And then
I think that was part of the far away rack weekly download. That like just being able to understand like the spatial effects of like lots of lows and highs close, like just the mid-range far away, lots of reverb far away, no reverb close. Like those. It seems so simple, but like you have to understand those things very well to understand like how you can like actually place things at different tiers in your music and give that real depth.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. That was one of the biggest things I've picked up too. By the way, we got a question here from OGK. Shout out to you, man, for submitting this. He wants to hear how we schedule our weeks for maximum productivity. Specifically, what do we do with nighttime sessions during the week? I can kick it off. I mean, I try and get an idea of what I'm going for at that time. I feel like generally you sort of go through phases. Even if you're like sticking to a genre, like let's say it's dubstep, you might be like into more like tear out kind of stuff, or if it's house, you might be more into like deep house or something. Generally, there's sort of like some characteristics that are inspiring you in the moment. So what I try to do, I'm really big on workflow library template. Library and template are what's going to aid your workflow and help you be more efficient. So like if you know that you're going for this vibe and you need these elements, like you're cooking a stew that needs carrots and peas and whatever, like prepare all that stuff beforehand and try and get out of your way as much as possible. So like if you know a house drum beat always looks like this, then have some MIDI with like maybe some 128s with the patterns already loaded, lay out a structure beforehand. If you're doing a mud pie session, like stop stopping to like critique what you just created. Just generate like 100 or or so like little bass riffs or whatever. Just keep resampling, and then judge it later. Like just generate a whole bunch of parts throughout the week. And like, I feel like that's a really underrated tip, especially about the template, where it's like, if you hop into your project and you already have a drum beat ready to go with some channels already set up, it's somewhat pre-mixed to your liking, you have samples in there you already like, you have a song structure laid out, it's at the tempo you like, and now all you have to do is pull from those mud pies and start checkerboarding and arranging. Like, that is totally different workflow and inspiration that you get writing when you're not like wasting that half hour beforehand just to get the drums going, and then now you have to generate all the parts. So don't underestimate your template and creating folders. I'm gonna just leave it off on this one last thing too. Like, if you're coming up with like a bunch of samples that you're gonna use later on, don't limit yourself to just like the basics. Like, yeah, find your best kicks, find your best snares, get some basses, some resamples, whatever. Those are kind of obvious, but like, if you like ominous vibes or you like tropical vibes or whatever, like, make a ominous folder, make a tropical folder, go to freesound.org and just like download a bunch of sounds and put them in folders based on vibes. They don't have to just be like typical, like traditional sort of sounds that you'd find in a sample pack.
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer the original question and the follow-up question that's just come in. So I'm gonna start with the follow-up question actually, because it's touching on something you just talked about. OGK asks, do you ever find that a template puts you into a box creatively, making the same track over and over, etc.? For me personally, and it sounds like you might be the same. If you're asking that question, you're worried about the fact that a template might make you make a similar track over and over. And my solution to that, because I'm much the same as you, don't put any of the creative stuff in the template. When you do that prep, save all of the 128s in your library. It's just another 2 clicks. If it's in your, like, if you already know what you want to, like, you're going on a tear out dubstep spree and you want to make 12 tear out dubstep songs and you have all of the sounds in the world that you would know that you want to use, and you make a tear out dubstep template and you have those sounds in there already, perfect. But what, the same thing for me is that I prefer to have just the template of everything else besides the sounds. So I have my sidechain set up already. I have all of the groups that I like to use. I have them organized in a structure that makes sense. As soon as I put a kick in the project, the kick is sidechaining everything. Same with the snare. And all of the creative stuff is just left to add at that point, right? So basically you could solve that by having your general template, which is just the one that I use all the time. And if you wanted to get more specific, like Tesko was talking about, load that stuff in there, and then you could have your specific types of project template. So for me, my nighttime sessions are mostly sound design and writing hooks or chords. Can also be guitar loops. Really though, like for me in nighttime sessions, because it's the end of the day, sometimes you're tired, like I really let my own intuition of like what excites me right now guide me. Like maybe I just got a new guitar pedal and so I want to play guitar. And so I'm going to record, 5 different guitar loops. One of them might be amazing and I'm like, okay, I got to save that one for sure. I'll probably save all of them, but bookmark in a way that guitar loop so I know that it's really great and then I could start a song with it later. Or maybe I'm just feeling like twisting some knobs and seeing what I can come up with sound wise. But more recently, I've actually found that I've liked taking the opposite approach, start with a really simple sound and then build a rack. Kind of like, if you guys have seen the YouTube video Doom Behind the Music, where Mick Gordon explains this whole Doom machine rack, I made like an iteration of that and then realized that is great, but I can only load one of those into each project because it's like so CPU, and like the full Doom machine I made took like 8 hours and has so many plugins and everything. It's like just putting it in the projects, it's like 30%. So what I've been doing is actually making Doom minis. So like instead of having 4 channels of a bunch of different stuff, have like one that does saturation, one that does like fuzz distortion, one that does like square wave distortion, and then some effects and some other little knobs that I can tweak. But just like having like processor friendly versions of that I can then like just put a simple sub 808 crack. Yes. Thank you, Nard. That is the video. If you haven't watched it, do yourself a favor. Right after that, watch it. It's incredible.
Yeah, not now. Not yet.
Not now. We are live. We are live, people.
Better not go anywhere. Watch.
But so like that's what's exciting me right now. Like that's what at 8, 9 o'clock, I'm not just gonna like, oh, I'm not really feeling it. I'm just gonna like watch funny YouTube videos. Like I'll like actually get something done. And so I think that's really important for you to kind of find something that excites you, but is also productive and that you can get excited about, that is basically serving the things that Tesko was talking about, template, library.
Man, one quick thing just on the point that you brought up there, as far as not putting any of the main creative stuff in the template, 1000% agree. And that's why I brought up the example of like house, for example, where it's like the drum beat is always going to be the same and it's the stuff around it that's unique. I think too, that's a really interesting thing to think about, because in my opinion, people are way, way, way too scared of repeating themselves. But then they'll also be like, well, I want to be a house producer. And it's like, okay, so you've already adopted this like rather arbitrary collection of traits to your song, but yet people don't think like house or drum and bass is repetitive, for example, when there's like 2, maybe 3 like arrangements that typically get used, always the same drum beat. I mean, every song has a kick, snare, or clap, and or like basically every song has drums, a sub bass, is sidechained, all these things. Like, I don't think you're going to limit your creativity if you write a song that follows the same arrangement, has the same instruments, and another like other common characteristics that you like to hear. Unless you're like intentionally going in and writing in all of the same MIDI, you should not be scared of repeating yourself. If anything, if you have any block during your process, you should pick more constants in your process and really like define and push the bounds of what you could get done. And I almost think it's like, I don't want to say arrogant because I know you're not trying to be arrogant, but I think it's almost like ego driven that people are like, oh, I'm scared to copy myself, because it's like, did you really get the most out of all of those characteristics and attributes you chose for the first time? Or is there maybe a bit more room of exploration for you to write a 140 BPM song with drums that uses pluck-like instruments in F minor, for example?
You could write a whole catalog with those.
You could build a career.
You could build a whole career on just those right there. Like, I mean, I know Slowform's in the chat. She pretty much makes everything I've ever heard of hers halftime, 140, lot of wobbly subs. I've never heard 2 songs of hers that I was like, that's basically the same song. It's just like we're talking about. Make a box of what you're trying to do. Even if you have multiple boxes that you're going for, like, make a box and then explore a lot. Make a template with a set of sounds in it and explore it a lot. Guarantee you're not releasing every single song. Not every single song you make in that template is going to be completely release worthy, especially if you're starting out. Like, sometimes try to make the same song twice.
No, seriously, I have a challenge for you guys. Open a project that you've released, but before you rendered everything, open that project, delete out all the MIDI, turn off all the drum samples, and then make another song next to it. That song's not going to sound nearly the same. It's not even going to be close. Like, if you're lacking inspiration, that's also a perfect thing to do. Take a project that you loved, one of your favorites, open that guy up before everything's frozen and flattened, and just create within that. All of the stuff in there you obviously already like. And then one of the things that's already in there, you can be like, oh yeah, I have this other sound in my library that would go good with that, with this rhythm that I just made. That is the litmus test, right? Like if you think you're going to make the same song twice, give yourself the exact same set of stuff and see if it is. Like anytime I've ever done that, it's not even, no one would ever be like, oh yeah, that's the same song. You just do end up with something different.
Yeah. And speaking of
people worry
templates,
about it too much.
Speaking of templates, I made, and it was September 2019, I made a trap beat template. I downloaded all of Southside from 808 Mafia's kit off the Splice, and I spent a nighttime session going through all of the samples in that kit and putting all the ones I liked onto drum racks. I had a bunch of racks that were like, I used the 3 drum rack method, had a few just like kick and snare racks, one of all the extra trap snares, a few of hi-hats, one of only claps, you know, and then a whole bunch, there was like 4 or 5 of just spices, random sounds and shouts and reverses and stuff that were in the pack. And then I went and I put all of the best subs, that like long sustained subs he had, on samplers. And then I put all the rest of them, those shorter like kick like 808s, on a couple more drum racks. And then I went through Reason's like stock sounds, this one called Clang, and I made like stack instruments of like 3 or 4 different clang patches of like tuned percussion, mallet, you know, plucky kind of patches, and I got 10 different ones. I've probably made 100 trap beats out of that template. And like the 87th one got me a placement. Like I've got this vinyl right here. This guy Scatta made a track and put it, it's the title track, it's called Hardships, it's number 1 on this vinyl, put it out, it came out in England, so I'm on British vinyl, for Christ's sake, because of the 87th beat I made out of that template. Some of those beats are awesome and got used by other people, have some of the exact same instruments in them, but like, think about AC/DC or Jimi Hendrix. It's like, oh, a drummer, a bassist, a guitar, some vocals, a whole catalog of very distinct songs that people love. Like, you know, like it's, you don't have to overthink this. Like if you have 2 songs and they sound too similar to put them both out to you, just put out the better one.
Totally. One thing too, I like that you said, you pulled in like quite a few things into your template, and I'd be willing to bet you didn't use every single channel that you had in your template in every single song.
Yeah, mostly not.
It's there and it's ready for you in case you want to use it. So yeah, make your templates customizable. Like if you know that you're going to be using this template for the next like month or 2, don't just drag in one kick. Like take some time, maybe find your 10, 15, 20 favorite kicks, make yourself a little mini 128. Do the same for your claps, snares. And now it's like all these sounds are custom tailored to you. Super easy. You just turn a knob. And yeah, it should not limit your creativity. Like, I think that's the funniest misconception is like people are too scared of repeating themselves.
Yeah, it's not, like people think of this word template like it's a paint by numbers song or something. No, it's like, it's more of a palette, if you will. Like it is a set of sounds that you pre-selected because you already liked them, and you put them at your fingertips, and you'll probably use 10% of them per song, maybe. Like I said, I had, you know, whatever, like 38 different 808 sounds in there. I probably had 16 kicks and, you know, like 32 snares and 32 hi-hats. Like I'm using what, 2-3 hi-hats per song, 2-3 snares, probably 1 kick, 1 808 sub sound on average, you know, like 2 spice sounds. That's a fraction of what I had in there. And on some of the tracks, I used those pluck sounds. Sometimes I'll use them in a low or a middle or a high register. It sounds different than the last time I used it. I did a different tempo, key, you know, different melody patterns. Sometimes I didn't use those at all. Sometimes I pulled a sample loop that a collaborator had made, and I was like, oh, this is at 120 in F minor. That's what I'm going to write the song at. And now I just have drums to put around the sample loop and bass to put under the sample loop. Like, Don't overthink this stuff. And the most important one, you put it, Rip Kenny, is that mixing template that has all your side chaining, all of your groups, your effects that you put on everything. If you use send effects, or if you're using the Skrillex bussing system, like have all that set up, because you could spend an hour setting that up per song, or you could set up once. And that's the real big remix your life moment, is when you use your nighttime sessions to put things together that you can use over and over and exponentially save yourself time.
Yeah.
Amen.
I think a lot of people would actually benefit from that palette that you were talking about. More so than putting people in a box. I think people could benefit from actually thinking about the palette they're going to use before they use it. Like planning out what colors you're going to use on this painting before you just start throwing paint at it. It's like, the analogy that I love is like when you're watching a movie, like it doesn't go from like bright rainbow vibrant to like dark, like just some whites and purples, and like every movie has like a very specific color palette that they bring out of the film, and that does not change for the entire movie. A lot of people will get hung up because they'll start grabbing all of their favorite presets and their favorite samples, and it's Skrillex womp bass and low key wobble bass and all of these things. Like, these are all my favorites, and throw it at the song. They don't necessarily work together. So if you actually spent your time figuring out what sounds like, you maybe you have like 4 racks and you're like, these all go with each other, these all go with each other, these all go with each other, and so on. And you just pick one of those and use those to make this song, and so on. You would actually have less deliberation on what sound you should use, and end up with a more consistent texture and coloration in your art when you're done. And it's going to sound like you were very intentional about it.
Man, so on that note, because I agree with you guys, that's one of the biggest remix your life things I've learned. But you want to kick it off with your story, Evan, and talk a little bit about how you found out about Producer Dojo, and then maybe what your first few sessions were like. What was the biggest breakthrough for you?
Yeah, so I don't have a perfect radio voice ominous intro for my story. It's eerily similar though. So I had been producing for a few years, and I was struggling to come up with work that I felt like was cohesive. And I had just watched the Ill Methodology Part 1, where he talks about daytime and nighttime sessions. And still to this day, that piece of information has been the most transformational thing that I have heard in my entire music production journey, hands down. And I literally want every single person watching or listening to this to take a long, hard look at yourself and ask, how many full days have you committed to making music in the past year? Not like, oh yeah, I gave myself 4 hours on a Saturday morning and then had to do this errand and that errand. No, I'm talking about like, you talk to your significant other, you talk to your friends, you told them don't hit me up this day. You put it on the calendar 2 months ahead of time. This is a music making day. Like, don't talk to me. And you spent 20 hours start to finish and wrote something that you were really proud of. Those are the days that you make the absolute magic. And that was really what I felt was missing in my life. And the biggest remix your life revelation that I had that came from the dojo. So I had just found that, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is a wizard. He's talking about the stuff that I needed to know that I didn't know that I needed to know. Like, there's no YouTube tutorial on like how to organize your time as a producer. Like, now there might be, but there sure as hell wasn't back then. And so right after that, I saw like some ad on Facebook about the Breakthrough Workshop. Went to the Breakthrough Workshop. Like, I was sold before I showed up. Like, really, I actually was. And joined the class of 808 that night. And the biggest thing for me was that it's not just like learning and tutorials, or it's not even just like workflow and like all that. It's not just that. It's having, like you said, Luke, a sounding board for feedback. That was the biggest thing that I saw as like a level up for myself. Like, I had a lot of friends that, you know, would listen to my music and they all thought it was good, or wouldn't tell me if they didn't think it was. Or the closest two people in my life, like my best friend and my girl, would tell me when something sucked. And those were the only two people that would be honest with me. And most of the time it was because it was a jumbled mess. Too much stuff going on, distill the focus, you added too many parts. And that single thing stemmed from mostly not spending a dedicated long writing session chunk of time on creating a rough draft for the song. What I would do is work on it an hour at a time, show up the next day. Oh, this is cool. What can I add? Oh, this is still pretty cool. What else can I add? Okay, this is very full now. Yes, layer cake, dude. That was literally the biggest thing that I got as feedback early on. That was like, oh my God, you're so right. Because fun fact, for the first 3 or 4 years of producing, only made house music, various forms. Starting in 2013, there was probably some very cringe big room in there. I know. Oh,
hey, bro, yo, I've listened to now. I've had the pleasure of hearing your 2015 through 2017 house music, and you made jams by then. So that's just a reminder to stick with whatever you're doing, whatever you're passionate about. He says he hated those 2013 tracks, but by 2015 there were some jams, and by 2017 there were some super jams in house, in the house genre. That I love.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's 4 years doing the same genre. You know, occasionally a blind squirrel finds a nut. So, where was I? So my problem was with house music. It's all so loop based. Like, no offense, house music producers or anyone. I love house music, but I would find myself adding loops of things and adding more loops of things and adding more loops of things. So by the time I started to like figure out what I wanted to do for this project, the Rip Kenny project, and it was bass music, I would just do the same thing, like loops of things, make a cool synth, make a loop, play that loop for a while, add other loops on top of it. And it was just this like Lego block looking song. And having someone explain to me checkerboarding and explain to me the layer cake phenomenon, explain how to distill the focus of your song was such a big level up. And, you know, like you said, like some of those house songs like were good, but they still didn't really grab people. You know, they didn't really tell a story. They didn't like draw you into the point where your eyes are like wide, like, oh my God, you know, like you want someone to like be listening to your song and not think like, oh, I wonder what I'm gonna defrost for dinner tonight. You know, like it should like be easy enough to focus on and also attention grabbing enough that like it consumes you. And none of my music was doing that. And through the Dojo, remixing my life in music allowed me to, you know, what I would say completely transform into music that I would like to think has some of those qualities now. And it would never have if I didn't find the Dojo.
Yeah, and I would feel remiss if I didn't add, there is an add-on to the Dojo that anybody can get. It's called Unlimited Track Feedback. And that, more than anything, was my single biggest upgrade, like, to my personal music making. Just changing, like I said, changing from trying to finish a track and then show it to somebody to just merely getting the idea of my first draft out, hitting bounce, sending it into Eszenze, forgetting it exists for 5 days, and then coming back to it after I've had that feedback sitting in my inbox a couple of days and be like, okay, now I'm going to spend a few hours. I'm going to watch the weekly downloads that were recommended. I'm going to go through this checklist, just do the checklist, maybe fixed a couple of things I had in mind, bounce it again, send it back to that same sensei. Like, stop, sitting in your own head for so long at one time. Got a first draft idea? Ooh, here's a melody. Here's some cool patches. This is the drum pattern and the subs that work. Here's a basic idea of arrangement. Bounce. Forget it exists. Step away from it. Go make more timer beats. Do anything else with your life. Come back. So I'm dropping this in the chat. It'll be for the people in the future time. Listening to this at some other time. We'll put it in the show notes as well. But get that track feedback, especially if you're at a point where you're doing at least like, if you're doing 4 drafts a month, just 1 bounce a week, it is more than worth it. It's just $20 for unlimited. And if you're doing any more than that, it keeps getting more worth it the more you utilize it. So that was the biggest thing possibly for me remixing my life. Like, the monthly Sensei sessions are so key, getting a full hour to ask questions and get high details shown for how to do things. But being able to drop any draft at any moment, whether it's 3 a.m. or 9 in the morning, just being able to be, okay, I'm done with this for now, and it's going to somebody with better ears than me, with a new perspective. And then let it go until I come back with that new perspective on it.
Totally. Make breakthroughs on the side while somebody else gives you breakthroughs. That's like, level up so fast doing that. Also, on that note, I want to talk, because I've been watching the chat here, and Katie mentioned, blocking out a day a month and coming out with like 5 tracks. And I see OGK in the chat here, who mentioned he tried doing his first timer beat and it didn't go so well. And what I want to say is, I think a big part of that process too is just a perspective shift that has to happen, like joining the community and realizing like how other people are working. You realize that like 5 tracks a day isn't a lot. And for the people that have taken sessions with me, like, we've talked about like 3 to 5 tracks a day is kind of the norm. Because if you're playing off that Pareto principle, that 80-20 rule, that's like 1 out of every 5 tracks are good. So you got to like set aside a day to get 5 ideas and then work on the best one. And that's how you get that quality you want. But it isn't until you actually gain that perspective and see how other people are working that you even realize like 1 a day is possible. 2, 3, 4, 5 a day is possible.
Yeah.
Now, obviously don't rush, but like, that is going to level you up, like realizing like I can create a framework for myself. And man, and just to bring it real quick to what we were talking about earlier, we should just start weeding out the term templates. Palettes all day.
Amen.
But
Amen. Yeah, templates definitely have a weird connotation with them. I mean, I still call it a mixing template because, it is. But I feel you, for any of the like the creative parts, it's much more of a palette than a template anyways. I'm not boxing myself in any way. I'm just saving myself a ton of time of looking for drum samples and shit. Like, I know I'm going to need drums. I know I'm going to need subs. I know I'm going to need spices. I know I'm going to need, and maybe there's a synth you really like to use. Maybe it's Serum. Just put 2 serums in there, even if they're on the initial patch, just so all you have to do is open that window and pick a patch and start writing. Or write in the initialized patch and then audition shit. And then you can do the loop menu or preset shredding really fast. Mm-hmm. If you always like doing some mud pies, maybe just set up that resample track already so that you can just hit record and go and do the resample that you're looking for without having to take the time to do that legwork to get to the place to do what you always do anyways. Everything's about saving yourself time. And you just reminded me of a story that was a big moment for me. It was actually like 2 weeks before I joined the dojo, before I found out that Ill Gates had an awesome school. I was in Atlanta for a beat battle. And I re-met a couple of the bigger producers. They had like come in second in that beat battle years before the first time I went, and I re-met them down there because they were like a featured act, and they invited me and my buddy Smart Boy to come over to their studio, and they were showing us kind of their process and how they make beats and how they work. And he's like, let me ask you guys a question. In a day of sitting down to make beats, how many beats on average do you think you could make? And we were both looked at each other like, if it's a good day, I will make all of one. And more often than that, less than that. Like we'll make part of one and maybe I'll start a couple, but I won't finish them and not like them, or, but if it's a good day, I'll like get all the way through one. He's like, all right, dope. No, that's a good place to start. Not to brag, me and my partner sit down. Every day we sit down to make beats, we make 5 to 8. That's our average. Not to brag, to say that if we can do it, you can learn how to do it. And that's what your competition is doing. They have learned to work faster and make more, and then the cream will rise to the top. And that really hit me like, oh, I can work faster. I have an imaginary ceiling to my speed and this imaginary idea that the more time I spend working on something, the better it gets. And that if I rush, it won't be as good. I have learned then, it was fortuitous that 2 weeks later, I showed up at the dojo and started to learn about separating my time, learned that timer beats and palettes were even a thing. I would like get an idea and be like, oh, this is the amazing God-given beat idea I have in my head, and it's got to sound just like this or I'm doing it wrong. Then I would open up my unorganized library. Then I would start down looking, no, that's not the patch, that's not the patch, that's not the patch. And then before I know it, 45 minutes have gone by. I barely remember what my amazing idea sounded like. And I would run out of steam and I would close the DAW sad. And now I'm just like, a melody, palette, melody down, bunch of different patches to run it through. I can literally just take that melody and move it down to the next lane and be like, nope, 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 nope. Ooh, moving on. Drums, drum beat, boom, clack, boom, 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 clack. Not that kick, not that kick. Ooh, that kick. Not that snare, not that snare. Ooh, that snare. Moving on. Hi-hats. Learn to give yourself ways to move faster, because that's really what counts the most. Like we've been talking about, even if you finish all these beats, not all of them are going to be the ones you want to release. Not all of them are going to turn into full songs, and that's fine. That's normal. I learned from another guy, he's a hit songwriter named Daryl Brown, who does the track feedback sections of the ASCAP Expo. And he said, you'll have a life event. You'll fall in love, you'll break up, you'll have a kid, somebody you'll die. Something big will happen in your life. You'll have a really good summer, and you want to write a bunch of really good, happy summer songs. Whatever it is, you'll have a life event, and you'll write a batch of songs. Let's call it 20 songs. 2 or 3 of them will be good songs that are actually up to your standards. But there's literally no way to get those 2 songs without writing the 20 songs. So learn to write faster so you can get all 20 songs out and pick which 2 get released.
Amen.
Yeah.
Tesko, what's your remix your life story?
Yeah.
Sounds like Evan had a follow-up to that.
There's such a bow on that. I don't even want to. let's go, Tesko.
Amen.
Remix your life.
Word, man. Yeah. So I was working a factory job at the time, making some car parts, being a little depresso about it.
What car parts?
I was working on like car doors and shit at a Chrysler plant. And it was not sunshine and rainbows inside. It was
you're like you seen the movie 8 Mile?
Yeah.
B
So
Rabbit,
you're, like,
bish.
in that
T Rabbit.
I mean, I'm right across from Detroit. Like Detroit River's like 10 minutes from
this is all making a lot of sense.
Yes. So yeah, big automotive scene here, you could say. And yeah, I got a job to, paid through school, doing that. And on the bright side, you could listen to music at the time. So I spent a lot of time just looking up YouTube videos, watching any sort of live stream, anything I could get my hands on, those virtual Riot live streams. I think there were some Dodge and Fusky ones, Mr. Bill videos. And I think it was through Mr. Bill or maybe Vesper that I came across Dylan, and I came across that first 40-minute chapter in the Ill Methodology, and I was like, man, this man with the fedora be spitting some facts here. And it really caught my attention though, because I'd gone through so many videos. I mean, I worked that job for a few years, and every single day I was trying to find new content. But that was the first video I really found where I was like, man, this is different. Like, he's really going in on like the philosophy kind of stuff and talking about everything else that everybody else isn't talking about. So, man, I burned that video. I used like a YouTube to MP3, put it on my phone at the time so I wouldn't destroy my data. And I must have listened to that like 20 times at least, I kid you not. Like every other or third day, I would just re-listen to it because I had these like long ass 8-hour shifts to kill.
Dude, I still listen to that like once every 3 months. Like that stuff, you need to burn that into your brain. It is so important. There are so many big nuggets that can really actually move the needle. Not multi-band sidechain compression for your lead, like that's going to do like 0.5%. Like could really move the needle, like 10% improvement that you need to remind yourself of. Go rewatch that video after you watch the Mick Gordon after this.
Yes. Yeah, honestly, man, I need to watch that again because it's been a while. But like, I remember after all of that time I spent like listening to those live streams and stuff, which was definitely worth it. I think as much time as you put into what you're passionate about, it'll always pay off. Even if you're retaining 10% at a time in the beginning, but you're revisiting those, eventually more stuff will make sense. But hearing Dylan talk about all you need is cut, copy, paste to make the best music, and you could do it right now. It's just a matter of putting in the time. Like, you don't need fancy techniques. Like, that really resonated with me, and hearing his story and you know, having that passion and just realizing, like, I don't want to be stuck here. I don't want to be, like, doing some job after school. I don't want to do, like, I want to be committing my life to music and the craft and, like, really doing this. So hearing his sort of philosophy on the whole thing and living your best life resonated with me. Then I found out about his Patreon, and I saw he was doing mentorship. And, you know, all of my friends have either given up on music or are just like casual listeners in my hometown, at least, or at the time, I didn't really have producer friends. So I was like, man, like whatever the cost of this thing is, I'm just going to invest in it because this guy clearly knows what he's talking about. I really like his process. And he was actually all booked out at first. And I met a friend shortly after that, and I was telling him, like, yo, you got to check out this dude. He's, like, really into the philosophy stuff. Like, he knows what he's talking about. Like, you'll like this. Because my buddy had just come back from Icon, Squashed Out. Shout out to my boy. He was on the EP, also on the podcast a bit ago. And we became friends around that time, and I was like, man, you got to check this dude out. Like, he's got a Patreon. He's got some cool perks on there or whatever. He's doing this weekly download thing. Which actually, no, I started off in the weekly download. And as I was showing him, I was like, oh my God, there's one slot available. Somebody dropped out. And I just snagged that shit immediately. And I remember the month after, had a session with Dylan. It was January. Went in all giddy, happy, like, man, this is going to be awesome. Finally got people to talk about music with. And I remember thinking I was so good at the time, knowing I could do better, but I remember thinking I was at a way higher level than I was. I remember bringing in that first track and just being like, man, this is going to be the shit. He's going to love it. And obviously, you know, he was cool about it, but there was a lot of stuff that need improvement. And I remember one piece of advice where it was like this mid-tempo, slower house, 4 on the floor kind of G house inspired thing. And he's like, man, like, it needs more ear candy. Like, it needs, like, some sprinklers on the high end. It needs more, like, in the stereo width. And this was all shit that nobody was talking about in tutorials because it's not a sexy topic to talk about. And I just remember being like, man, like, how does this guy hear these things? Like, this is crazy. And it was at that time I just realized, like, man, there's so much from these tutorials and stuff you're not going to pick up on because it's not a cool topic to talk about. So as we got deeper into it and he talked about like vertical versus horizontal energy paired with checkerboarding. And then I think my favorite thing that really stuck with me, he was talking about, and this seems to be kind of a theme in the chat today, you need to have a box before you can think outside of the box. Like, I was so stuck on, I'm going to learn all this shit. It's going to be cool. It's going to be unique. It's going to be crazy. Kind of like Luke, you were saying, like, people are going to appreciate all my layers of complexity. It's going to be sick. And just realizing, like, man, like, I'm really like just running around here aimlessly, not knowing what I'm doing. So getting that like personalized feedback from somebody that knew what the hell they were talking about and has been through all of those same mistakes. Like I know to this day I would still be struggling with a lot of the same shit and writing horrible music if somebody better than me didn't just be like, yo, don't do this or do this, you know, and like here's how to optimize your workflow. Like the daytime nighttime sessions is another huge thing. I just didn't want to say that's the main one because that's sort of a big one and an obvious one if you're in the dojo at this point, but like that's so huge, preparing you know what you're going to be working with beforehand. So all that stuff, like I think I was maybe 6 years into music at that point, maybe had worked in FL Studio for a year. No, like two or three actually. And then I got Ableton, but I was like playing in metal bands and stuff. You know, I thought I knew my shit. I was like, yeah, this will be easy.
Yeah,
And
no, Tesko is an absolutely sick guitarist. So if you need to hire him for guitar riffs or licks, you need to do that because he's incredible.
I got you.
And note, I will jump in with something I wanted to touch on.
Yes, please.
You said, it just kind of hit me like when you were talking about like watching tutorials and then having him explain these concepts that specifically applied to your music. You don't necessarily watch tutorials like based on your strengths and weaknesses and what you know and what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. You sit down to watch tutorials and you see another one that looks interesting, and it might be interesting to you because you're doing sound design right now and you want to know how to make this Skrillex bass, or because you don't know what a multi-band compressor is. And so you feel like that's really important. I hardly use a multi-band compressor.
Yeah.
Except in mastering, like maybe on my bass group. There's a million ways to skin a cat, and multi-band compression is probably not going to be the way that you make good music. But on YouTube, it looks really interesting, and you need to learn that, right? Like it's there, like you don't know it, like the video's right there. You need to watch it. No, like that's why feedback is so important. You need someone else that knows more than you do to be like, no, you're doing these things good. Keep doing those. You don't need to watch more tutorials on those. This is the stuff that you need to focus on. This is your blind spot. This is the stuff you didn't know you were screwing up. And by the way, here's a video to watch that fixes that blind spot.
Here's an hour of Bill Gates deep diving onto the one thing that will help you the most today.
Are you joking? Like that, what could be better for your production career? What could be better?
And to touch on, the multi-band compressor fixes your issue thing, it's like, you're right. If the song is crap, no amount of multi-band compression will ever fix it. If your song's amazing and you don't use a multi-band compressor, it's not going to ruin it. Multi-band compression is one of those things that will get you from like 85 to 88% good when used correctly. Like it'll help change some balance in an already good thing, or be icing on a turd cake. It doesn't really matter that much. Like it's a good tool to have, but when it comes down to it, having like really fundamental understanding of good composition, of good arrangement, maybe probably definitely more important than either of those, good sound selection. I'm not even going to say sound design, because designing your own sounds is only as good as you are at selecting sounds. Because if you make a 15-minute mud pie and all of it is shit, it doesn't matter. You got to like be able to pick the good moments that are actually worth writing with. So, practice on somebody else's sounds. Go listen to shit on Splice and figure out like, we talk about referencing in the mix a lot. And that's important. It's vital. You got to be able to reference when you're mixing and mastering to know how loud to make shit, how balance, what balance to get out of shit. But like reference, that's what the arrangement exercise is for. Like reference when to put sounds and what kind of sound to put there. If you listen to your sound in your library and then go back and listen to that Skrillex track you're trying to emulate, and the bass you are choosing sounds nothing like theirs in a qualitative way, like it's, doesn't have the same frequency response and the same balance or the same width, you just ruined your chances of making a song that sounds anything close to that. So you've got to learn to train your ear to choose good sounds, to put in a good order, to change that order through the whole track. Like, those are the most important parts. You figure out how to do that shit, you get your orange belt. Then we'll talk about mixing and mastering, which is another very, very vital skill. Learning how to do basic engineering.
Seriously though, like what you just talked about, before you even get to mixing and mastering, I've said this on the podcast before, but I'm going to say it again because it's so gosh darn true. The best sounding mix you will ever do in your life will also be the easiest, because that mix started with the right sounds playing in the right registers with each other, composed in the correct rhythm, and you didn't make any problems for yourself. Everything sounded good together before you broke out the fine tools, the EQs, the compressors, the saturators, the multi-band compressors, the side chains, all these things. They sounded good by themselves without screwing with them. It all worked. And then you just nudged everything into the correct alignment and boom, your mix is done. Like,
amen.
I remember reading some Reddit thing from Porter Robinson in an AMA, and he's like, 80% of my mix work is just tweaking the volume faders. And I was like, what? But what about multiband compression? I just learned about that on YouTube. I just spent an hour watching videos on YouTube about that. What about that? No. Like, pick the right sounds. Can't polish a turd. Sample selection. He also said that in that Reddit thread. And volume. Just like those two things will get you so far. But you can't fix the problem of two sounds that don't work together. It's like, if they just don't work, they just don't work. And so you need to be able to have the repetition of creating enough things, enough songs, putting sounds that don't work together enough times to know, okay, that doesn't work. This other thing, though, I think it does. You have to develop that instinct, and there's no other way to do that other than repetition of putting things together and listening and seeing what it sounds like.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, we got a few more questions in the chat I want to make sure we get to before we sign out.
Big up chat.
I know we're only
We're
only technically signed on for an hour, but screw the clock. We got questions. We got people with us, so we're here with y'all guys. We're not leaving yet. Mike E. Camel Hotline asked, what's been a spark for you lately? For me, it's been having way too many non-musical things to do on my to-do list, and then getting a random idea for a melody in my head, and then saying, fuck all of my actual responsibilities tonight. I'm going to stay up till 5 a.m. making this song.
Yeah.
So
for me, it is
do with that what you will.
Attempting to get 10% as good at guitar as Tesko is.
Stop.
Basically, I just like learn an album at a time. Like, I learn how to play like System of a Down, Toxicity all the way through, and then just like learning those chord shapes and those rhythms and stuff. Then I'll like, when I'm writing like guitar riffs to use in my music, like that stuff will just naturally come out. Like sounds and different chord combinations that I like will just naturally find their way into what I'm writing, and then those guitar riffs that I'm writing that are actually, enjoyable enough and more complex than just a basic like chug rhythm, like has been really like inspiring me personally, being on just that like upwards like section of the learning curve of guitar.
So it sounds like you're using your nighttime sessions to expand your mental library of chord shapes and progressions and changes, so that when you're in your daytime writing session, they just come out naturally. It's like having an organized library in your mind.
Big brain move.
Tesko?
Cool. Yeah. For me lately, it's been harmonic minor vibes. I love that scale. I feel like, oh no, what am I saying? That's secondary to doing vocals. I've been huge on like learning how to sing, been working with a vocal coach, learning like vocal processing. The harmonic minor is kind of an extension of that because I feel like it's just like you can make really cool vocal melodies on that. So that, messing around with vocal processing, and then messing around with articulating my bass in different ways. So I do like sort of trap oriented music mainly. A lot of 808s in there, finding different ways to like, you know, support my arrangement by using combinations of different 808s and synth basses, and just getting a little more articulation, like using Reese's or like donks, and using like contrasting those with like shorter 808s or longer 808s, slides, glides, all that stuff. If you're making bass music or music that's oriented around the low end, like you need to give love to your bass. So like make sure you're not using the same sub that you use in the drop as you are in the intro or like something like that, because it's going to be very hard to get a articulate song.
Amen. Good answers. All right, Wicked asks, or says, another thing Ill Gates pushes is daily journaling. Journaling has been monumental to my progress, not just for music, but mental health as well, though I haven't written every day. Have you been able to stay consistent? How has it helped your progress? Evan?
Oh.
Yeah, so for me, like Wicked mentions, I'm not always consistent with it, but I find that when I am in not an ideal headspace, journaling is how I get all of that not ideal headspace onto a page. Like, what am I screwing up? What are the things I'm repeatedly falling into as a trap? And like writing in like all caps, like all of the things my subconscious mind has been telling me that I've been not necessarily listening to, or like it's just a perfect way to get your repetitive thoughts onto a page and then fix them, knowing that it's like it's in front of you now. It's like it's on your notepad, like staring you in the face, like you're gonna remember it. Journaling is such an undervalued thing, and I think that for myself personally, like I wish I did it more because I know how powerful it is, but it's like the first thing to drop off when you're doing well. You know, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna sit down and start doing this thing that I'm working on. You know, it's just like when you don't think you need it, you like it's easy to forget about it. And so this is a reminder for myself as well. Like, it's powerful. It's powerful. It reinforces your good habits, and it helps you dissect and fix the things in your process or in your life that you wish you could solve. Just all good things. Do it more often as possible.
Yeah, amen. I would also like to do it more. I have chunks of my life where I'll do it every day or every night, really. I'm a night owl. We talk about daytime and nighttime sessions. They're pretty much all nighttime sessions for me. I love sleeping in and staying up late. And generally my writing has been, at night or, maybe really early in the morning, right before I go to sleep. Kind of like getting down what I went through that day, organizing it. Sometimes it's been like a gratitude, like writing down all the things I was grateful for that day. Even if they were tough things, finding a way to turn that into gratitude. Like, I'm grateful for the challenge of, and that I learned blah, blah out of it. I really do want to do that more. And that is one of my resolutions. I actually left my journal at home and was out of town at my lady's house all over the New Year's weekend, and just got home yesterday evening. So I actually haven't written in my journal yet this year, but that's definitely going to be one of my focuses, is actually sticking to a schedule.
This isn't just the Human Music Podcast dishing out advice for all the humans. It's also friendly reminders for ourselves. So again, big up chat.
Yeah.
Big up.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not the best at journaling either. So before I give my cop-out answer, yeah, I don't. But my sort of form of doing that Slightly different, but I've always been huge on like writing lists. Like I always have a whiteboard or like really multiple whiteboards around me at all times, papers on my desk with a pen nearby. I'm always writing down what I need to do. Kanban Flow is an awesome website where you could create boards for yourself and make like columns and then add like basically like sticky notes to it. But you can add like due dates or like requirement lists of like what needs to get done for that sticky note to be completed. So I'm like a huge organization freak. Google Calendar is huge for me. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of my friends probably think I'm like a wacko because I'm like, all right, I'm free 6 to 7 Wednesday. I can slot you in. Or like,
Yeah,
I'm
can't go
very
past
much
7. That's
live
weekly
life by
download
the
day.
hour. Sorry?
Can't go past 7 on Wednesdays. That's weekly download time. So
Yeah,
that's
you
when we're
feel me?
going to learn some stuff.
But yeah, I'm very huge on like I live my life by the hour, and I make sure it's been a new thing for me this year. I used to try to do the journaling when I would feel overwhelmed, but 2020 took me for a hell of a ride, to be real. So my new routine has just been waking up early, like 5 a.m. usually in the morning, and I'll do some form of meditation, and that has changed my life. And I'll make sure to clear my mind first, but also think about like what are my A's and what B's can I cross out, and just really try to focus in on like what do I want to be great at and what would I be okay sacrificing in this lifetime, and then review my list regularly and cross off shit that I thought maybe could be cool in the moment, but like I'm gonna sacrifice them for my A's, if that makes sense. So meditation, hella lists, and then also like really thinking about what I want to get done that day, and then crossing off anything that doesn't fall under the category of I stick to 3 things. So like vocals has been one, working on the podcast, and some side stuff I got going on. We won't get into that. Nothing illegal. Just saying.
Only partly.
It's my OnlyFans.
Yeah.
So, next question is from my dude Nick, aka Godface. He asks, how do we all use our reference tracks? I use mine in a couple ways. One, as I'm picking my sounds and shaping my sounds with EQ, and then leveling them into the mix, that's one way, just to make sure I'm on the right track as I'm building my song, making sure I'm picking sounds that work in that genre. If I'm trying to make a trap beat that's kind of in that like Megan Thee Stallion type of vibe, and like, oh man, like what is their bass doing in that track? What's the frequency response of that sub, and how is the relationship with the kick working to get that vibe? And then how loud and what are the frequencies of the snares and the hi-hats that give that contrast but still leave enough room for the vocal there? Or maybe it's a bass track, and then how huge and fat and smacking are these kick and snares, and how is the side chain working? Just making sure that, that I'm on the right track. And then at the end, I'm using metric AB. Like I'll put the reference track into metric AB, and I really like going frequency band by frequency band, and just A being what's going on below 100 hertz in my track and their track. I mean, like, what is when I'm only listening to this little band of the sub, what's the ratio feel like? And then when I'm only listening to the bass of, whatever, like 100 to 250, like what's that feel like? When I'm just listening to the mid-range or the high mids or just the highs, and being able to really separate out each subtle section and be like, okay, what is just the top of my snare and the top of my hi-hat and the top of my vocal doing together? Because that ratio is really important, separate from how loud is the vocal compared to how loud are the drums. And then just finally, like, what's the actual volume at the end? Like, how far should I push the limiters to sit with this genre? 'Cause sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I can push this real hard, this is smacking, and then I'll listen to the reference and be like, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to dial that back because this is an R&B joint. Like, I don't need to go that ham.
Yeah, my answer is pretty straightforward. It's referencing at the mixing stage for frequency response, like what is the curve of a reference track in the genre that I'm making? What's the loudness? And then just like detail points, like if you've watched The Approach with Seth Drake, like what is the connection of the kick and snare? Like how crispy are the hi-hats? Like how loud is the bass in comparison to the vocal if the two are playing together? Those kinds of things. But mostly in a mixed sense, or doing an arrangement exercise. And dissecting a song that I really like and breaking it down for what's happening in each part to see like what I liked about it. And then, that's pretty much it.
I'm gonna drop a video here in the chat. I use sort of a strategy built off what Ahi talks about in this video here. I generally tend to use 2, 3, 4 reference tracks in my project once I've completed the writing process, and I'll sort of follow what he does, use Voxengo span, and then you can, if you set up the routing correctly, you can send in multiple tracks and then use like the frequency distribution. And I know if I can get somewhere in the ballpark of where those songs are, then my song will sound like it fits with this collection of other music that I sort of want to fit within for this track. I'll also use mastering the mix levels. It's a VST for checking like your LUFs and stuff like that. So I'll generally tend to use a combination of span and that. And then sort of the other thing I'm listening for is a bit harder because it's not really a metric. Evan, I think you talked about, Porter Robinson talking about leveling. Like, leveling is so huge, and it's one of those things I wish I took seriously earlier on, because you need to train your ears to get a feel for how sounds are relative to each other. So, like, generally, I find people don't tend to push things far back enough if it's not a main element. And, like, the reference just helps me catch a few things. Like, if my vocal's not sounding as clear or my drums aren't hitting as hard, like, generally I need to back some stuff off or, like, turn up my vocals a bit, let's say, or, like, maybe get a bit more of that sparkly high end or whatever. And then I find when I have a few reference tracks to go off of, I can really like dial in that relationship, but that's just something you're going to need to train your ears for. But, you know, you also need to be somewhere within that LUFS level and that frequency distribution if you want to get an accurate image of how your leveling should be between your elements.
Amen. All right, next we got Slowform. Shouts out to Katie. Asks, do all of us guys hear melodies / sounds or come up with ideas in our head? She says, I don't think I've ever actually sat down with an idea in mind. Is that something that developed over time?
Rarely, but yes. It's one of those things where, like, if you do hear a song in your head, it's almost never when you're sitting at your computer. So wherever you are, like, pull out your phone, take a voice memo, and just do the cringy, like, humming of the melody. And then if you hear a bass line, like, try and get close to that.
I've got so many of those.
Yes, so many of those. Normally, when I go to sit down to write that song, it doesn't end up like that song anyways. So it's almost like here's a good bit of inspiration to work from, and cool. Like, if it ends up like what I yelled into the phone, perfect. If not, like, it's, you know, if it ends up like something else that I like, great. And if it ends up terrible, well, at least I had an idea that could have been cool, you know. And for the most part, it's more of the two-way street of, like, putting something into the computer that, like, you know, you might hear, or really just like trying stuff and then listening to it and getting ideas from that. Rarely is like I hear a full song in my head and sit down and that whole song turns into the song that is in Ableton. Like, that just rarely happens. But, like, stuff does pop into my head when, you know, you're in the shower or you're riding mountain bike or you're out for a walk or whatever. Like it does happen, but it's not the driving force of my writing personally.
Yeah. For me, stuff pops into my head. There's like a little cosmic radio station playing in the back of my head most
man.
of the time.
I've worked with you before. You're literally like the idea man. Like you're just idea, and then it's like, yep, that one. Let's roll with it.
Yep. Yeah. So we've all got our strengths, and what I've been telling people a lot is like figure out what your strengths are, what comes easily to you, and just lean on that. Make that the centerpiece of your song, and then figure out how to support it. Like I was really trying to be Mr. Sound Design, and my sound design just wasn't coming along that good. And then I realized that like, you know what comes to me easily? Beatbox, drums, and like little quick short rap lyrics. And so now that's pretty much all of the songs I write center around that. Like I'm not that great at writing chord progressions or making the craziest sound design. So instead of like, ooh, that's a cool little melody idea. Now I'll do a loop menu of it. And then I'll put some drums behind it and a bass line that matches and see how the song evolves from there. And then, ooh, this is fun. This got a little vibe. Let me freestyle a little bit over it and like chop one little bar of rap that I'll put in. Like those are things that come easily to me based on my skill set, my brain, my soul, whatever goes into that. So whatever yours are, practice a lot of things, figure out what comes easily and do that first. Like if you're dope at playing the bongos, sit down and jam on bongos, get a great groove, and then write pieces around those bongos. If you're really good at sound design, come up with a killer sound design and then figure out what melody makes that sound design sing. Whatever that is. Tesko?
Yeah, amen on that point of find what you're good at. Like I find anytime I'm like struggle fucking through the process and just hating everything I'm writing, it's usually because I'm neglecting what I'm good at and trying to be something else. And like for me, I've just found vocals are fun. I mean, hella harmonic minor practice from being in metal. I play guitar. So those are like three things I've just really taken as like a core piece of my sound. And I find anytime I stray away from that, and I'm not saying like never stray away from your strengths, like build up your weaknesses too, but like anytime I'm just like really hating everything I'm writing and feeling all this self-doubt, it's usually because I'm like overlooking those things. What was the question again?
Do we hear melodies and sounds that we like bring to the DAW?
While you think, I'll remind the audience that I'm sure we all have, but I particularly have ruined many a good song by thinking to myself, oh no, I wanted to sit down and write a song that sounded more like Nero today. This doesn't sound very Nero-y. How do I shoehorn this thing that I'm working on that I'm not Nero and I'm going to try and do the Nero thing myself? Like, no. Like, sit down and write what you're good at, what comes to you naturally.
Allow
Luke,
the process.
For Luke, it's melodies. You know, I don't know what it is for me, but whatever it is for me, it's that. And then Tesko is going to finish the rest of the question.
Yeah, as far as do I hear melodies, I would say that's maybe like 10% of the time, but generally like I have a pretty good idea of what kind of music I like to write and what I like to hear in other people's music. So generally I find I'll pick up little tidbits that I'll sort of put into my framework of library template workflow, or I'll pick up on like something somebody else did and find my or I'll be reminded of something that I forgot. So either I'll learn something new or I'll be reminded of something I haven't done in a long time, and I'll pick that up. So like, for example, like I've been listening to this artist, Don Tolliver, a lot lately. He had a melody that's like da 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 da, and I was like, okay, cool. Descending has these like big interval jumps. Let me take that and play with that for my next few songs. Then he has another song, Can't Feel My Legs, where the whole chorus is just, I can't feel my legs, repeated a few times with some humming. And I was like, you know what? I never hum or simplify my hooks. Let me just mess around with simple hooks and humming.
And you also can't feel your legs. So
yes.
I've been sitting a while on this hard chair. I'm also getting a tingling sensation.
But yeah, little stuff like that. And like it was kind of reinforced. I don't listen to Kid Cudi personally that much, just because I'm not on the wave. But like when his album dropped, I saw everybody tweeting like, I could just listen to Kid Cudi hum, and I was like, man, I do not incorporate enough humming into my music. So let me take what I already do and let me try adding humming, bigger interval leaps, and do more simpler like descending or ascending melodies. And that has given me so much to work with in the last month or two that I don't even feel like I've still fully explored that yet, but it still sounds very much like what I'm going for still.
Yeah. So here's a fun question from Eszenze. When are we going to hear a 3-way human music podcast collab EP from you guys?
I feel like the podcast is a 3-way collab.
In a musical sense, that's a good question.
When we can link up. We've been talking about it.
Yeah, COVID, kind of sparked us even doing the podcast, all via Zoom. But yeah, we would love to get in the same room and actually make music. But, that's not the only way to do it, as we all know. We could send stems and stuff. And, I don't know if it's top secret anymore, but we've been working on this really big sound library all together, each doing what comes easiest. Like I did none of the serum patches and most of the melodies that are in this pack. I did all of the vocal one shot and drop, like pre-drop vocals that are in it. Like I did my parts and everybody else did what they're really strong at. So that's a big collab on our part, and we're all making songs using these sounds. And so, maybe we'll end up making some collab tracks out of those sounds and put it out as a dope EP and / promo for this cool ass sound pack that we made.
Spicy promo, a hot sound pack coming your way.
Yeah, I've literally
not even a sound pack. It's like a whole different thing.
It's like a whole, crazy. It's not really a sound pack. It's more of like an entire bass music sound library pre-organized for you. And basically, it's 98% of what I use to make music these days.
Yeah, actually, though.
I've made so many songs out of it, and I'm just scratching the surface of what we can do with it. So, good question. And yeah, that's some shit we got to think about. Let's see. Next question. Unless you guys have more stuff to do while I'm reading the chat, talk about something. Fill the dead air.
Yeah, lean into your strengths. That's huge. And don't be scared to like hop into your DAW if you don't have an idea. Like I find a lot of times too, like, you can lean on your strengths a bit and then find like one variable you could tweak within that. Like if you like distorted sounds and you always use a saturator, like you got pedal, you got amp, you got a dynamic tube, you got, all these different sort of substitutes for that. Or like if you like really like trippy psychedelic stuff, you got choruses, you got flangers, you got phasers, you got, different reverbs you can use. And like I'd be willing to bet, even if it's a characteristic in your songs that you really like to use, or it's a strength you lean on heavy, you still haven't probably explored everything within that. Like generally I find I get out of phase of using certain things. Like I'm back into like using flangers a lot because I haven't used them in quite a while. And instead of like having reverb be my main go-to spatial effect, I'll like experiment with a flanger or a phaser and see how I could push those, for example. So like, yeah, just go in, do what you know, and then just like tweak one thing that you never do. That's also like a really good way.
Yeah, love it. OGK asks, random question, but what do you guys do for work? Well, I'm Trap Jesus. I'm a carpenter. Also do some handymanery and painting and such. That's what keeps the lights on in the studio and gave me the skills to build this room that I'm sitting in, and stripped it down to the studs and rebuilt everything from the electrical to the framing to the, sheetrock and painting.
Such
and
a flex.
Such a flex. What's funny is that we both did that same thing, although I am not a carpenter at all. But I did work in construction management for quite a few years, stacking up my pennies so that I could move out of a expensive area to live into a more reasonable area to live. And music is my full-time thing right now, while I work from those savings that I stacked up diligently so that I could be doing this. But yeah, I also built this studio from the ground up. Although I'm sure if you took a magnifying glass, or not even a magnifying, if you just walked into this room and looked around, not on a Zoom call, you'd be like, you don't know what you're doing, do you? Tesko.
Drywall is whatever. Yeah,
It's not very good in here. It's very bad.
You're gonna put foam up anyways. Who cares?
True.
You just take a photo of the background, you Photoshop out all the little like mistakes, and then you just set it as your zoom filter.
Even
the background.
Even that mural on the back wall, like from 15 feet away. Oh, it looks great, but if you walk up to it, you're like, what the hell happened, man? Oh my God. Jesus.
Modest Kenny. He didn't have to tell you that, but he did.
It's bad. If you see it, it's bad. It's really bad.
I make websites look pretty.
You do more than that.
I'm a web developer. I give him a little functionality too.
Woo.
And I teach at the dojo, of course, until that's my full-time job.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, pretty soon. Nick Godface asks if we're gonna have pre-orders on that human music palette, and yeah, pretty soon here. We're also coming up with some, speaking of palettes, putting together palettes and templates and a bunch of tutorial videos to bundle all together with that to really stack on the value. So I don't know, pretty soon here, maybe our next live will have some good a pre-order link for you guys, because we're actually looking for a kind of a first class to do some beta testing and get an insane discount on what's already going to be an insane value. So yeah, keep that in mind. Let's put that as a goal. 2 weeks from now, we'll have a pre-order link.
I love it.
Sound good, guys?
Yeah.
Talk about remixing our lives.
I'm so stoked for everybody
moving on the thing we spent most of last year building.
I know, seriously, right? Like, this thing has been in the works for so long.
Yeah.
Since before this pod. Before?
No, I think we had the idea of the podcast.
Around the time the podcast started, we started working on this thing.
Yeah.
It's been at least 8 months.
Yeah. But that's how it goes sometimes. Like, you just keep working, you think, and you know what? We did a lot of that drafting we're talking about with this, where it was like, oh yeah, it's this part of it's done. And then 2 months later, it was like, you know what? We've had a chance to work with this a bit and realized that was the first draft. And now we're working on draft 2 of that same part. The Serum library is now getting revamped, and it just keeps getting better. So by the time that it actually gets to you guys, it's going to be immaculate and impeccable and implacable. I don't think that's the word I'm going for. Moving on. I'm running out of vocabulary because we've been on for 90 minutes. Oh, Katie asks a really good question. What are our 2021 goals? My first one is to sit down and write out my 2021 goals. I've definitely got some. One of them is going to be releasing music as Luke Rain at least one time per month. So not more than a 4-week break between any releases as Luke Rain, and utilize some of the sweet Facebook ads skills that Rip Kinney taught me to get my streaming numbers popping. Also, finish, release, and market the absolute hell out of this amazing library tutorial, stack and pack that we've been talking about. And growing my company with Bounce Gang, Gangaroo Records Music Distribution and Publishing Administration, who are a sponsor of the podcast. What's up? Yeah. That's where I'm going to be putting out all my music through my crew's own distro company. The basic package is only $10 a year, completely unlimited, no nickel and dime bullshit that some of the other companies do. And then registering all those songs with our publishing administration, because it turns out there are like 9 or 10 places where you have to register and submit your music to actually get all of the money you're supposed to get from your streaming royalties. And they made, my homies in Bounce Gang made a form where I can fill it out one time and it registers all of those places, and then all of that money gets collected back to one payout for me.
Take whatever percentage you want. Like, I need that. Like, no.
Yeah, and a lot of the companies that do that kind of it's called publishing administration will take 50% of your publishing, and if you sign a publishing deal, they'll give you an advance fee, but then take 100% of your publishing forever. Gangaroo is made by musicians for musicians, so we're going to take 15% year 1, 10% year 2, and 5% year 3, and any other year after that.
It's like incredibly fair.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
Yeah, Gangaroo is actually a game changer, man. Like, fucking insane what you guys are doing.
I mean, it's how it works when, instead of being business people, are like, how much money can we squeeze out of musicians? We're musicians, which are like, all these assholes are losing our business and we're building our own thing. And by the way, all the homies should get on board.
Amen.
Yeah.
So my goals for 2021, the first one is finish writing an album and release an album at some point in the year. I've got a few kind of cool ideas to make it not just 12 songs, but a bigger collection of art and story and reflection of, all of the things that I want my art to be. So that's number one. Number two is 1 million streams on Spotify.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot, but that's only actually 83,333 repeating streams per month, which is not far off from what is happening right now. So I think that one's possible, even though it sounds like a ridiculous number.
I feel like that sounds low for you, bro. I feel like you're gonna 10x that shit.
Nice.
No, stop.
That's not even fair. No, that's it. That one's kind of a vanity metric, but something that's like a nice goal to shoot for. And then by the end of the year, I'd like to make a basic income from music, because my runway of savings will not last forever. And so I'd like to make a basic income from music, whether that be streaming, whether that be any all of the facets of music as they combine, just to be able to make a very basic income from music. And those are my three.
Cool. Yeah, getting out this pack, definitely a huge one. Putting out some new music where I'm doing vocals and sort of bringing out this new brand, this new style. I'm going to be putting out a plugin. That's kind of the one thing I don't want to mention, but fuck it. I'm going to be making a free plugin to help y'all with mixing. And, just sort of dip my feet into that, and aiming to make music a full-time thing this year. So expect a lot more samples and plugins and cool stuff. I'm going to be working with the boys here for you guys to make creating as fun as possible, and just take on as many more students as I can once that time opens up. And
Amen.
Big thank you to everybody, seriously, for supporting all of us here. Like, this shit would not fucking be possible to you unless it was for you, and it feels so close. So, not that I never thought it'd happen, but like, the closer it gets, the more I'm just like, this is fucking crazy. So shout outs to all of you.
Yeah. Big up, chat.
Big up.
So this will be probably our last question. OGK, shouts to all the good questions from you, says, curious for us noobs here, but how long after joining the dojo was your first EP release?
I'm gonna start this off with, this is a almost unfair question, because everyone joins the dojo at a very different point in their production career.
Yeah, unfair, man. Jeez, OGK.
No, not. Yeah, I mean, it is a question that is important, to a lot of people, and that does make sense to ask, but is more in the grand scheme of how many hours did you spend in front of your computer before you made something quality enough to release as an EP on the Producer Dojo label? For me, I was 5.5 years into producing when I released my EP, and that was about a year and a half with the Dojo.
Yeah, I think I was somewhere around the same time, around 5-6 years into music, and it took me about 2 years after joining. Like 6 months in, I started working on it, and then it was a year and a half long process.
And let's see, I joined the Dojo 3 years ago this week, and I still haven't put out an EP on the Dojo, so different for everybody. Some things I have done since joining, put together an entire EP with Sam Shoemaker called The Grimy Gospel, and we ended up hiring another engineer that I really trust, that I know just could nail it in way less time than me. So we ended up hiring him to mix and master the project, and be the vocal engineer on that to get the final draft. We had completely built the EP, recorded everything in my studio here in this room, and then once we knew exactly how we wanted it to be, took it over there and recorded all the tracks and had him mix and master it. That was about, I think that came out like 16 months after I joined the Dojo, and the Dojo was huge in getting me to a place where I could make those beats to that quality that he would want to rap on and actually put out and put all the money behind it that he did to promote it.
That EP did really well, right?
That EP did well. Like, some of those tracks are over 100,000 views, like the ones that we promoted as singles and put videos on and such. And then speaking of Sam Shoemaker, I curated the remix EP for another track I did with him called Do It For Me. And Evan, Slowform, Munchie, and also No Breaks all came out with incredible remixes for that. And I helped curate that and get that together and get it to Ilgate so he could give that top level feedback on it. And I'm really proud of that too. But it's different. Like Evan said, it's different for everybody. Like, I mean, we all come in at different levels. Some people have been producing for longer, which feels like it could be an advantage. But I know in my personal case, I came in with a lot more bad habits than a lot of folks. Like, we talked to Slowform about that on the episode where we interview her, and highly recommend go and listen to that episode. But we talk about that how it's like, she came in with literally no experience. Like, I got Ableton, now I'm in the Dojo, how do I start? Where I came in thinking I knew a bunch and had to spend the all year breaking bad habits, and even really longer than that. I'm still breaking bad habits that I learned from just winging it. So, it's different for everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to say it one more time. Big up, chat.
Big up, chat. Yo, make sure you're in our email list if you want to stay in the loop about this huge, I don't even want to call it a library because it's so much more. And I hate to honk our own horn here, but like, really, we're making a crazy ass thing for y'all. If you want to get more details, get in on the first launch, help us beta test it and make it freaking pristine. Obviously, you're going to get every single update we do to it, and we're going to be working closest with you. Make sure you're in our email list, www.thehumanmusicpodcast.com. Don't forget the www. Or go to freemegapack.thehumanmusicpodcast.com if you don't have the free mega pack. And super stoked to roll this out. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. We greatly appreciate you. Thanks, Luke, for posting that.
Just making sure the link works. Nope, I typed it wrong.
Excellent. But seriously, everyone that joined us for this inaugural live episode, it means a lot that you guys spend your time sitting to us yab about music, human music things, and we just really appreciate the fact that you guys show up to hang out with us, and this has been really fun. Hopefully some of these tidbits of knowledge have been helpful. Some of these answers to your questions weren't too long-winded, and gave you guys some insights that help you remix your life in 2021. So, yeah.
Woo!
All right.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Let us know your 2021 goals here. Drop it in the chat, and we're going to be back soon to talk with you guys. Thanks for tuning into this first live stream here. We greatly appreciate you. I know we've said it a gazillion times tonight, but for fucking real, man. Like, this shit's only possible when we're a community. And, yeah, we're going to grow together. We're going to crush 2021. And, man, have a beautiful night, humans.
Yeah. Peace.
Love y'all.
And peace among worlds.
Yee.
I like it.
Humans, thanks so much for being with us. Remember to like, share, subscribe, rate, review, anything you can do to help this podcast reach more producers just like you. Thanks to the producer Dojo, reminding you it's time to remix your life. So if nothing else, click on that link for Dojo TV, get in the Discord chat, create some resolutions on stick.com with us, and go for it. It is time to remix your life. Have fun. Who knows? You might win a year of the class of 808 for free. But until then, make sure that you sign up for either the weekly download or sign up for the Producer Dojo membership, which includes the weekly download archive and monthly lessons from our senseis, all the hosts here included. And of course, there's the unlimited track feedback add-on that we highly recommend. We talked about a lot in this episode. So, ninjas, humans, all y'all, peace and peace among worlds.